Following closely on the concept of parent and child tables in relationships is the idea of keys being either primary or foreign. Strange language perhaps, but in fact the idea is fairly easy once you grasp the basic principle. One of the best ways to ensure that a key field in any given table meets the criteria of being existing, unique and persistent is to use an arbitrary value that isn't formed from any of the descriptive entries or attributes that form part of the user-editable data of the record. If you create your own separate ID fields, you can set them up to automatically always have a value, which takes care of the existing criterion. You can contrive a way for the value to be unique without having to be concerned about people with identical names, duplicate social security numbers, or the myriad other gotchas that can catch you out when key field values that are based on data end up not being unique. And if you assign your own key field values independently and make sure they aren't user editable, that also addresses the requirement that the keys be persistent. For those reasons, a good practice is to have a specific field in each table that serves as the key field and that will be an auto-entered value that the user doesn't have edit access to. Such a field becomes the unique identifier for every record in each table throughout your solution, and it's commonly called the primary key for the table where it serves that purpose. Most often, the primary key field would be likely to be named with the table name and with the letters ID appended. If you make a habit of doing that or something similar, and if you're consistent about it, it will always be easy to find the primary key in whatever table you may be looking at. So for example, in this copy of the work file, the relationship is still set up as before, but I've added primary key fields to both tables. In the table I've called Parent, I've added a field called Parent ID, and in the Child table, I've added a Child ID field. In order to make these fields work seamlessly, I would set them up as auto-enter serial number fields, with a value perhaps prefixed with a P or a C and a trailing number. And I'd also set them up with the prohibit modification attribute enabled, so that the user won't be able to change the value once it's generated on creation of a record. Similarly, in the Child table, the next serial value I'll enter will be 004 because there are 3 records already existing in the table. And now both the primary key fields in the 2 tables in this file have auto-entry options enabled to ensure that the keys will be generated and maintained, meeting the requirement that they exist, that they're unique given that they're generated from serials, and that they're persistent, meaning that they can't be edited or changed by the user. That's a good start, but to make use of the new key fields, I'll need to change the relationship between the 2 table occurrences in this file. I can't simply make the connection between the 2 primary key fields because the values in those key fields will be unique to their respective tables and records, so there'll never be any matches. Instead, I'd need to add a special new field that will control the relationship. For example, I could add a field to the Parent table to hold the IDs of the child records that are to be associated with that parent record. So I'll add a Child ID field to the Parent table. Then I'd need to edit the relationship between the 2 table occurrences so that it will use the new special purpose key fields I've created. To do that, I could either delete the relationship by clicking on the line between the 2 table occurrences and pressing the Delete key on the keyboard, or alternatively, if I double-click on the relationship line, like so, the Edit Relationship dialog appears, and here in the lists of fields at either side of the top of the dialog, I can choose different key fields for the relationship. So in the Parent table occurrence, I'll choose the Child ID field, and in the Child table occurrence, I'll also choose the Child ID field. I'll click the Change button, and you can see the new key fields showing in the panel in the centre of the Edit Relationship dialog. When I click OK to dismiss the dialog, you can see that the relationship between the 2 table occurrences has updated to show that the connection is now based on a match between values in the Child ID fields in each table. Now when I exit the Manage Database dialog, you can see that the relationship is no longer valid. No child records are showing in the portal on the current parent record. To re-enable the relationship, I'll need to add the Child ID field to the current layout, and back in browse mode, I'll need to enter some values. So for example, if I enter C001 and press return, I've now instantiated the relationship to the record for Simon. And similarly, if I add the other IDs using the multi-key principle, each of the other records can be associated with the current record. In this case, I chose to add a field in the parent table to store the appropriate child ID values to set up the association between a parent record and one or more child records. I could alternatively have added a parent ID record to the child table, and the connection would work differently but just as well. Let's try that. In the child table, I'll now add a parent ID field. In the Relationships tab, I'll now edit the relationship to use the parent ID field in the parent table occurrence and the parent ID field that I've added to the child table occurrence. And of course, because it's no longer being used, I can now delete the child ID field from the parent table. Now, in order to instantiate the relationships between the parent record and the child records, I'll need to go to the child layout. I'll just move some of these fields up a little to provide some room. Now, holding down the Option or Alt on Windows key, I'm dragging the field to create a copy and adding the parent ID field to the layout. Now I'm going to choose the New Window command so we can select the parent layout in one window and the child layout in the other. And you'll see that when I add the parent ID, P001, on the record for Simon, we've established a connection between Simon and the existing parent record, and so the record for Simon now appears in the portal in the window that's showing the parent layout. If I navigate through, say, to Kelly's record and add P001, the parent record ID, on Kelly's record, when I press Enter to commit the record, Kelly also appears in the portal on the parent layout. And similarly, if I add the parent ID to the record for Josie, all three records are now associated with the parent record with parent ID P001. In a case where there will only be one parent record that is related to multiple child records, like what I've set up here, setting up the relationship with the parent ID stored in the child table may be preferable because it doesn't require you to store multiple IDs in the same field. Or if you will, it doesn't depend on FileMaker's multi-key field capabilities. When you've got only one value in a key field, as in this case, a single parent ID in the parent ID field within the child table, it's slightly easier to manage because you can make and break the relationship by adding a single value to the field or by deleting the contents of the field. So for example, to break the connection between parent record P001 and the record for Josie, I can simply delete the parent ID and Josie is no longer related to this parent record. I can recreate the relationship very easily by simply adding the single parent ID value back into the parent ID field on the record for Josie. On the other hand, if it's set up the other way round using a list of related key values on the parent side of the relationship, as I set it up originally, there's a bit more finesse required to manage the connections. For example, to break the relationship with one particular child record without affecting the others, you'd have to delete one of the values from the multi-key field while leaving the other values in place. Regardless of which way you choose to set it up, that is, whether you have the child IDs in a field in the parent table or the parent ID in a field in the child table, the field that you add that stores the ID from another table is known as a foreign key field. For example, in the child table, in this work file, the parent ID field is considered a foreign key field, whereas the parent ID field in the parent table is the primary key field in that table. In any solution, you can expect each table to have a single primary key field, but a given table may have a number of foreign key fields that are establishing and controlling the links to records in various other related tables in the solution.